The lights of a 7-Eleven are designed to make you feel safe, a fluorescent sanctuary in a world of shadows. But tonight, that white light is merely a spotlight for the things that should not exist. Between the hum of the cooling units and the chime of the entrance bell, a thin veil has torn. You are about to witness 3 accounts of the gaib, the unseen, manifesting in the mundane. A mother's love forced to trade blows with a vessel of pure malice. A hunger that turns a man into his own grave. And the silver-tongued deception of a predator wearing the mask of a victim. Lock your doors, ignore the scratching at the glass, because once you step into these shadows, the light won't save you. It only makes it easier for them to find you. The air that Thursday evening was thick, heavy with an unnatural humidity that felt like the breath of an ancient ghoul pressing against the glass of the 7-Eleven. My mother, perhaps sensing the nuhas, the ill-fated copper sky, decided a Slurpee might drown out the oppressive silence of the neighborhood. Inside, the store was a sterile sanctuary of humming coolers and flickering neon, but the sanctity was an illusion. Aside from the clerk, whose eyes were vacant as if his soul had been bartered to a marid, there were only 2 others. A woman clutching scratch cards with the desperation of a gambler facing a Sijin sentence, and him. He was a jagged silhouette in a filthy hoodie, pacing the aisles with a rhythmic, predatory grace. He didn't shop, he circled. His presence felt like a khabith, a wicked spirit manifesting in the mundane. Every 2 seconds, his head would snap toward us, his gaze lingering a fraction too long, heavy with a hunger that wasn't of the flesh, but of something far more ancestral and dark. I tried to focus on the swirling neon ice, but the waswas, the whispering doubt, began to claw at my mind. When I finally looked up, his eyes were locked onto mine, unblinking and void, as if he were staring through my skin into the very ruh beneath. The atmosphere curdled the moment the middle-aged woman departed, the chime of the doorbell sounding like a funeral knell. The air was suddenly sucked from the room, replaced by a cold, suffocating pressure, the zakum of dread. My mother moved toward the back, seeking refuge in the mundane act of grabbing water, but the shadow followed. He drifted behind us, no longer pretending to browse, his movements fluid and unsettling, like a jinn gliding through the dunya. I stared into the glass of the freezer door, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. In the reflection, his silhouette loomed directly behind mine, a dark stain against the frost. "Hey, what's your name, sweetheart?" he rasped. The word sweetheart felt like a sir, a black curse crawling over my skin. Before I could even draw breath to scream, my mother stepped between us, her maternal instinct flaring like a protective amulet. "Back off," she hissed, her voice trembling but sharp. "She's a kid." The man didn't flinch. He merely smirked, his eyes dancing with a chaotic, shaitani light. "Relax," he countered with a chilling calmness. "Your daughter is attracting the gaze of a hunter, and you're just jealous." The audacity of his kufr, his blatant lack of respect for the sanctity of a mother's protection, stunned her for only a heartbeat. She roared for the clerk, her voice a desperate adhan calling for intervention against this encroaching darkness. The employee, a man who looked as though he had seen the many faces of Iblis on the night shift, rounded the corner with a steel-edged command. "Sir, you need to leave now." The predator's eyes flashed with a flickering, infernal resentment. He muttered a curse under his breath, a low vibration that sounded like a talisman of ill intent, before storming out. The heavy glass door slammed with a violence that vibrated through the floorboards, the rattle of the windows sounding like bone hitting bone. My legs were a pair of trembling reeds, but my mother's hand was a firm anchor on my shoulder. "Don't worry," she whispered, though her eyes remained fixed on the black void beyond the glass. "We're leaving too." We paid with frantic hands, the clerk's eyes darting to the window as if he expected a marid to shatter the glass at any moment. My mother forced a weak joke about needing a protective circle, a hisson to keep the creeps away. I laughed, but it was a hollow sound, a brittle mask for the terror that had already seeped into my marrow. As we stepped into the night, the air wasn't just cold. It felt like the frozen breath of Azrael. The parking lot was a desolate wasteland, the flickering streetlights casting long, distorted shadows that looked like reaching claws. We moved toward our vehicle, my fingers white-knuckled around my drink, praying the Muawwidhatayn, the verses of refuge, under my breath. But the silence was a lie. From behind a black van, a shape detached itself from the darkness with the speed of a striking cobra. Before a scream could even form in my throat, his hand, rough as grave dirt, latched onto my upper arm. His grip wasn't human. It felt like the iron shackles of Jahannam searing into my flesh. "Come here," he snarled, his voice a guttural manifestation of nafs, pure animalistic desire. He began to yank me toward the yawning maw of the van's sliding door. I let out a sound I didn't recognize, a raw, primal shriek that tore through the fabric of the night. My mother lunged, her love a divine barakah that refused to yield. She grabbed my other arm, and for one horrific eternity, I was the center of a violent tug-of-war between a protector and a monster. Then came the sound, a sickening, fleshy thud. He struck her, his fist landing with the weight of a falling headstone. The man's fist connected with the force of a falling Sajil stone. I watched, paralyzed, as my mother's glasses skittered across the asphalt like discarded relics. Blood, dark as aswad ink, sprayed from her lip, yet her grip on me remained a holy tether. He struck her again. A sickening crack echoed through the lot as her nose shattered, but she let out a defiant cry, her voice a takbir against the encroaching shadow. "Let go of my daughter!" she shrieked, even as the monster wrapped a heavy arm around my waist, hoisting me toward the van's sliding maw. I felt the cold interior of the vehicle, a qabr, a grave on wheels, waiting to swallow me whole. Then the nur, the divine light, broke through. Headlights cut the darkness like twin swords, and the roar of engines signaled the arrival of witnesses. The creature froze, his predatory rhythm broken by the sudden intrusion of the world. With a final, hateful shove, he recoiled into his van, the engine screaming like a trapped ifrit as he tore out of the lot. I hit the concrete, my palms raw and bleeding, but I was alive. My mother collapsed beside me, her face a mask of crimson and swelling, yet her hands still searched for mine, ensuring I hadn't been stolen into the night. She had endured the wrath of a shaitan to keep me in the land of the living. The scars she carries now are not marks of victimhood. They are the khatam, the seal of a love that even the darkest corners of the jinn world could not break. The next part of this story will fill your mind with terror. Where are you sitting? How scared are you? Don't forget to comment. New viewers, subscribe or follow now. The clock struck 12:40 a.m., a time known as the Sat al-Zulma, the hour of darkness, when the veil between our world and the Ghaib grows thin. Bailey woke me with a touch that felt like a cold omen. Her eyes were clouded, reflecting a restlessness that seemed to come from the life growing within her, or perhaps something sensing the void outside. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the heavy silence. "I am starving. I need something spicy, something to burn." In the logic of the late night, her cravings felt like a command from a Kahin, an ancient soothsayer. I donned my hoodie, a flimsy shroud against the midnight chill, and mounted my bike. The ride to the 7-Eleven was short, but the air felt stagnant, as if the wind itself had been exiled. The store appeared ahead, a fluorescent altar in the desert of the suburbs. Inside, the hum of the refrigerators sounded like a low-frequency dhikr, a repetitive chant that made my head throb. The clerk's nod was robotic, his eyes fixed on a point behind me, as if watching a shadow I hadn't yet noticed. I gathered the offerings, chips, donuts, and the sour worms Bailey craved, feeling as though I were preparing a ritual sacrifice for a hungry spirit. On a dark impulse, I reached for a pack of cigarettes, a vice I usually kept hidden, a small haram to steady my nerves. Stepping out of the clinical light and back into the zulmat, the absolute blackness, I felt a sudden heavy dread. To the right of the entrance lay the designated smoking area, a patch of asphalt cursed by a broken lamp and the stench of decay. It was a pocket of regis, a filth that clung to the back of the throat like graveyard soil. The light above the bins had been dead for months, leaving the corner in a state of eternal eclipse. I leaned against the cold brick wall, the lighter's flame flickering like a dying soul. Just as the tobacco caught, a sound drifted through the stagnant air, a soft, wet whimper. It wasn't the cry of a beast, but the muffled, rhythmic sobbing of a man in the throes of a spiritual azeb, torment. My blood turned to ice, thick and slow. I reached for my phone. The screen's glow felt like a feeble nur against an ancient dark. I clicked on the flashlight. The beam pierced the shadows, illuminating the trash bins, and there, huddled in the grime like a discarded djinn, sat a figure. He was rocking back and forth, his clothes mere rags of filth, his shoulders shaking with a grief that felt older than the city itself. "Hey man," I called out, my voice cracking. "You okay?" The rocking ceased instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, a samum wind that dried the moisture from my throat. The figure began to lift his head, and as the flashlight's beam struck his face, I felt my heart plummet into the depths of Barzakh. This was no man. It was a vessel of pure Masiyiba, calamity. His eyes were stretched wide, the lids retracted as if pinned back by invisible needles, the left pupil twitching in a frantic, unholy rhythm. The horror was not just in his gaze, but in the ruin of his flesh. The left side of his face was a raw, weeping crater of red sinew, torn open as if by the claws of a ghoul. Tiny ribbons of skin were wedged beneath his blackened fingernails, like grisly trophies. His chin glistened with a thick, dark ichor, a mixture of saliva and the lifeblood of his own countenance. The realization struck me with the force of a divine strike. He was devouring himself. He stared at me, his head tilting at a sickening angle, his expression one of a predatory curiosity, as if I were a new scripture he was trying to decipher before tearing the pages. Okay, I'm going," I whispered, my voice a frantic prayer as I began to retreat. But the entity did not let me depart so easily. In a single jerky motion, like a puppet pulled by the strings of a shaitan, the man stood. He did not merely rise, he unfolded. He was a towering monstrosity, a jinn-like colossus reaching 7 feet into the stagnant air. His shadow stretched across the pavement, a long, distorted finger of darkness pointing toward my soul. Up close, his height seemed a physical manifestation of Zulm, a cruel injustice of nature. His head twitched with a sickening, audible snap of bone. Without breaking the lock of his twitching eyes, he raised a trembling, filth-encrusted hand to the raw crater of his cheek. I watched, paralyzed by a sear of pure terror, as he hooked his jagged nails into the weeping meat of his own face. He peeled back a strip of flesh and, with a deliberate, ritualistic slow motion, popped it into his mouth. He began to chew, his jaw working the grisly morsel with a rhythmic, satisfied grinding. The air around him suddenly thickened with the stench of jifa, the rot of a corpse left in the sun. It wasn't the trash. It was the smell of a man becoming a grave while he still breathed. I turned and fled, my boots pounding against the asphalt as if trying to outrun the very air of that cursed place. But the takdir, destiny, was cruel that night. In my blind panic, my foot caught the edge of a concrete curb, sending me spiraling into the hard ground. My chin collided with the pavement with a sound like a shattering fuchar. Pottery. Pain, white and searing, exploded behind my eyes as warm blood began to soak into my collar, a crimson sacrifice to the cold earth. I scrambled toward my bike, my hands trembling like those of a man possessed. Behind me, the sound of bare feet slapped the ground, a wet, heavy rhythm that grew closer with every heartbeat. "Start!" I screamed at the machine, my voice a desperate plea to the heavens. The engine sputtered, a weak cough against the approaching shadow. He was right behind me. I could smell the raija of his decaying flesh and hear his breathing, ragged and hungry like a beast from the pits of Sijin. Finally, the engine roared. As I jerked forward, the giant leaned down, his face a nightmare of torn meat, and spat. A warm, thick glob of his foul essence struck my face. I sped away, fueled by a terror that transcended the physical, as his laughter, a broken, choking sound like a dying ifrit, echoed through the night, a final curse to follow me home. The next part of this story will fill your mind with terror. Where are you sitting? How scared are you? Don't forget to comment. New viewers, subscribe or follow now. The midnight air was a thick shroud of ghaim, a fog that clung to the skin like a damp burial cloth. I walked into the 7-Eleven seeking nothing but the artificial fire of an energy drink to ward off the exhaustion of the late-night drive. The store was a hollow temple of humming neon until a sound pierced the silence, a whisper sharp and jagged as a broken blade. "Please, please help me. Don't let him see me." I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. There, crouched between the rows of snacks like a cornered animal, was a girl. She looked no older than 15, her face a mask of smeared mascara and primal terror, her eyes reflecting the flickering fluorescent lights like a trapped djinn. "I need help," she choked out, her voice a desperate istighatha, a plea for rescue. "He's here! He's looking for me!" The raw fear in her gaze felt like a cold hand on my soul. Without hesitation, I stepped forward, assuming the role of the protector against an unseen Zalim. "It's all right," I promised, reaching out. "Just come with me. We'll get help." She stayed behind me, her small frame trembling like a leaf in a Samum wind. We moved toward the counter, my eyes scanning the dark expanse outside the glass. The clerk straightened, sensing the arrival of a fitna, a great trial. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed, a sharp metallic ring that sounded like the strike of a ritual gong. The girl gasped, dropping to the floor to hide herself. A man in a dark hoodie stepped into the light. His eyes weren't those of a common thief. They were burning with a terrifying, focused intensity, scanning the aisles with the precision of a rakib, a watchful guardian or a hunter. "That's him," the girl hissed from the shadows of the shelving, her voice cracking with the weight of her kauf, fear. "Please, don't let him get me." I signaled the cashier to summon the authorities immediately. The man began to advance, his hands outstretched, not in a gesture of peace, but like someone trying to reclaim a lost soul before it vanished into the abyss. "Let me talk to her," he pleaded, but his voice was jagged with a desperation that I mistook for malice. The air in the store grew static, charged with the energy of an impending sawaik, a lightning strike. I stood my ground, a self-appointed sentinel guarding the girl who whimpered at my heels. The man in the hoodie took another step, his face twisted in a mask of agony. In my ignorance, I saw only the face of a tagut, a tyrant. He slammed his palm against a nearby display, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the aisles. "Please, just move out of my way. You don't understand." "She's not going anywhere with you," I growled, my voice steady despite the hammer of my heart. The girl gripped a metal napkin dispenser on the counter, her knuckles white, her eyes darting like a trapped bird's. She kept muttering a frantic dua of her own, a repetitive "don't let him catch me," that fueled my resolve. We waited in that suffocating silence for 4 minutes, an eternity in the realm of the barzakh. I watched the man, and he watched the space behind me, his chest heaving as if he were fighting an invisible ifrit for the very air he breathed. The silence was shattered by the wailing of sirens, a dissonant chorus that announced the arrival of the shurta, the guardians of the law. Blue and red lights strobed against the store's glass, casting a rhythmic, hellish glow over the aisles. I felt a surge of triumph, a belief that the Nur had finally arrived to banish the shadow. "You're safe," I whispered to the girl, whose face was half hidden in the darkness. "They're here." But as the officers stormed through the door, the script of my reality began to unravel. They didn't draw their weapons on the man in the hoodie. They didn't cast him into the dirt as a mujrim, a criminal. Instead, they moved with a singular, chilling focus toward the counter. Before I could utter a word of explanation, the man pointed directly at the space behind me. The officers lunged, bypassing me entirely to tackle the girl. She let out a sound that didn't belong to a human child, a piercing, feral shriek that sounded like the cry of a sila, a shape-shifting desert spirit. She fought with a supernatural strength, clawing at the floorboards and cursing in a tongue that made the air feel cold. "What are you doing?" I screamed, my mind reeling. "She's the victim! He's the monster!" The officer's glance was sharp, a blade of reality cutting through my delusion. "She is the suspect," he barked over the girl's inhuman screams, "and he is her father." I stood frozen, the world tilting on its axis as if I had been cast into the depths of Sijin. The man in the hoodie stepped closer, his face no longer a mask of malice, but one of profound, soul-crushing huzn, sorrow. He looked like a man who had walked through the fires of Jahannam and back. "She ran," he said, his voice a hollow echo. "She stabbed a woman tonight. I've been hunting the streets for her since sunset, praying I'd find her before she struck again." The girl's cries shifted. The facade of the victim vanished, replaced by a raw, hysterical malice. "She deserved it!" she wailed, her eyes flashing with a shaitani light as they dragged her toward the cruiser. "She tried to take my things!" Her father simply closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered, a final wada to the daughter he no longer recognized. I looked down at the counter. The Slurpee she had been holding sat abandoned, melting into a dark, visceral red puddle that looked like a pool of fresh blood. I realized then that my desire to be a savior had blinded me to the fitna standing right in front of me. Sometimes the one you protect is the very monster the world is trying to cage. The story will get scarier as it goes on. Where are you listening from? Is your heart pounding? Comment below. New viewers, subscribe now.